comments? I don't think there's anyone here that would like to address us. Is anyone watching online?
Just one person.
Okay, if anyone online would like to address the board, please click the raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen. Nope. Okay, we will move on then. Next is Board of Education comments. Anyone have anything for the good of the group? Nope. Okay.
There's no comment.
Next is Code of Conduct. Yep.
All right. We are on code number 10 today. Code number 10 states, I will strive for a positive working relationship with the superintendent, respecting the superintendent's authority to advise the board, implement board policy, and administer the district. The author goes on to say, what does this mean? It's a little negative here. You may have run for the job not liking the superintendent or the previous board. You may have a real grudge against past district decisions and blame current board members for them. And you may want to get rid of the superintendent and start over. If you ran on that platform without ever being on the board or working with the current superintendent, you must still operate within the legal and customary codes of conduct. Learn the complex interaction of a school board and its leadership, as well as the complexity of the superintendent's role. Act respectfully and be a good learner. If you later feel you were right, you will then understand the process of change and can work far more effectively within appropriate parameters.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, we're going to move on. First up is District 75 reports, and first is the business office. T is going to talk about the budget.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to discuss with you our FY24 budget. The Finance Committee had an opportunity to meet this past week. And when we met, we took some time to look at our FY24 draft budget for display, but I'm going to wait just a second. We could go to the next slide. And when we took a look at the budget, there were some major changes that happened between the last time it was presented to the board and when it was presented to the Finance Committee. Those changes include revenues decreasing. Our food service revenue decreased by $280,000. Thankfully, this also came with a food service revenue expenditure decrease, but that decrease was a direct result of what we're seeing as our actual revenue earned this year. So you may recall last year, all students ate for free. Regardless of how many meals they took, they ate for free. We had a lot more participation in the year when you could eat for free than we do this year. So as we get to the end of the year and we're seeing how our actuals are going to end the year, we have adjusted FY24's revenue and associated expenditures to account for those. I took a look at our grant revenue and we decreased that by $350,000 as well. Now this has to do with our carry forward allotments. So if you get to the end of your grant, the end of the year, and you haven't spent all of your grant money, the law allows for some of that money to be carried forward. So say you get a $100,000 grant, but last year you didn't spend $50,000. This year you get $150,000. Okay. Well, what we did is we eliminated those carry forward allotments. We took out the revenue and the associated expenditures. So it had a net impact of 0, but it was a change to revenues and expenditures. Overall, our expenditures decreased in the areas of food service, custodial service, transportation, and shared service by $320,000. The remaining other purchase service decreases happened as a direct result of those grant reductions that we talked about earlier. With that said, we still have a balanced budget for FY24. I know that we have capital projects that we generally come to you with and discuss those. Just to let you know that with our budget being so tight this year and with the Carl Sandburg Fine Arts project on the horizon, pretty much we have funneled all of our funds into those projects for this year, holding off on any discretionary projects as well. So tonight we're asking the board to adopt the budget for display. We would post that in the newspaper and come back and have our hearing in June. And with that, are there any questions?
Putting off, excuse me, putting off the discretionary projects is not going to harm anything as far as the buildings and stuff like that.
Nope.
Sorry, T, I'm a little confused because when I'm looking at the document that I reviewed over here, it said that revenues increased by 6% and expenditures increased by 25%. I don't know if I'm looking at the correct bit. This,
Let me take a look. Oh, that.
this was in,
So that is actually overall from prior year. These changes happened from prior board meeting to this board
oh,
meeting.
sorry, I missed that. Thank you.
Anything else for T? Okay, thank you, T.
Thank you.
Next up is teaching and learning.
Hello. Tonight, we are going, actually, I'm gonna have Stephanie Drake, the principal at Washington, present some information. At a previous board meeting, we heard the results of the sleep study. And so this is some follow-up research we did. A lot of the feedback came specifically from Washington more than the other two schools. And so we wanted to dig into that a little bit more closely in terms of the academics and the behavior and some of the other things to see if there were any connections between the start times and what we're seeing in the classroom. And so I'm gonna have Stephanie take over. Thank you. Welcome.
Good to be here tonight. Thank you. So the Rush Sleep Study identified some basic areas, and we looked at our data pool to see whether or not we saw a significant impact and whether it gave us ideas for further advancements. So we started with academics. We did share the raw data with you in your board packet. I believe it's behind the presentation in your board packet. So we looked at academics. We used our STAR scores, both in growth and in attainment of reaching the 50th percentile of the national norms. And the good news is we saw increases from 21-22 to 22-23. So the change start time does not seem to have had a negative impact on Washington academics. Next slide, please. We also looked at discipline. The number of referrals and students associated with those referrals has decreased from 21-22 to 22-23. The number of crisis or support calls and students associated with those calls has also decreased from 21-22 to 23. The interesting piece is that the data shows that the students with the most frequent intervention needs are consistent. Those students are consistent from 22-23, and that accounts for 90% of our office referrals and support calls. So we reached the conclusion that the change in start time does not appear to have a negative impact on student behavior.
Stephanie, could I ask
Yeah.
a follow-up question there?
Yeah.
This is something that I've been thinking about ever since I read this slide. I seem to remember the 21-22 school year that we felt like we were having many more discipline problems and attention problems at Washington,
Mhm.
maybe all the schools for that. And I thought we sort of said that that might have been sort of COVID related because kids were out of the classroom and now they were back in the classroom full time.
Yep.
Did you take that into account when you were saying that 22-23 is lower than 21-22?
So I do think that COVID had an impact. The other thing, though, we do think is that we're seeing it being the same students from 21-22 to 22-23 that are the major piece of this. But so we're not seeing an increase in behaviors due to the sleep study, due to the change start time in our other students.
Right.
Yeah. And I would love to be able to identify the cause of that increase in 21. I will say that principals all over the state are telling me the same thing.
Right.
So. Next slide, please. So then we took a good look at attendance. Attendance is less indicative of everything. We did look at our overall enrollment. We have about 450 kids in 21-22 and about 450 kids in 22-23. And our attendance and chronic absenteeism and chronic tardiness seem comparable from 21-22 to 22-23. Our numbers don't indicate that we had two major changes in our policy, in our practices. One of which was we don't count COVID quarantines anymore as quarantines. In 21-22, those were required quarantines and were counted as excused absences. Now they're considered as illnesses. The other piece is that it used to be that on day 10 of a consecutive absence, that child was unenrolled and then had to re-enroll when they returned. We no longer do that. If the family gives us a return date or a possible return date, it stops them from unenrolling that process. So that has made a big difference in our attendance because those children would have been dropped, not counted as chronic absent, and then re-enrolled. And now they may have 30 days absence for a trip to Mexico over December or something like that.
How does that, I'm confused.
Uh-huh.
I'm confused how that impacts this when we say that our chronic absenteeism and chronic tardiness are comparable, but now we count them differently. Doesn't that mean it's actually gone up then? If we're counting it differently and it's still
So
comparable?
in our raw
That's the
numbers,
part
it
I'm not
does, it looks like it has gone up like 3 or 4% from 87 to 92. That is the reason. That difference in 87% to 92% is part of the reason.
Because the kids would have been dropped, Christie, so their missed days wouldn't have been counting. And now with the 22-23 year, now the days just keep counting, which would add on to the absenteeism rate.
Give
So
an
we're saying
example.
5% could be accounted for just from that chronic absenteeism where we have been potentially dropping the student or unenrolling before. That be accurate?
Yes,
The other thing we've noticed this year is more families are taking vacations.
Yep.
As compared to last.
so we're also seeing vacation increases. So our move forward is we need to take some good look at our attendance practices and programming to really address the needs of our families. And that would be for both tardies and absences.
Has there been any change to the way that the tardies are being recorded from the previous year?
So there hasn't been any way the tardies have been recorded. But what we've done is we've started talking to families and children about why they're absent. And doing some motivational pieces. For students, we've also started some family talk about bedtime routines. And about ways to set your backpack out in the morning so you're not looking for your shoes. And all those kinds of things. And that family piece, we plan to continue and enhance next year.
But the increase in tardies this year can't be attributed to like a new way of recording the.
It can't be for a new way of recording and it can't be, parents aren't saying to us. It's because of start time. And we couldn't find any trends in our reasoning. Next slide goes to fatigue and hunger. We did talk with our health office about whether students are showing up in the health office with fatigue. And they see no difference from 21-22 to 22-23. In that if kids come into the health office because they're extremely tired, they're usually going home sick. They've got a fever. They've tested positive for COVID. Or we've seen lots and lots of upper respiratory stuff this year. Teachers, we also double checked that with teachers. And teachers are also confirming that. Hunger, on the other hand, continues to be an area at Washington. It was in 21-22. It continues to be in 22-23. We explored with T the option of providing a building funded breakfast for all We are going to move forward on exploring that and figuring out all the details with it. We know we can fund it. We know we can do it. Now it's about figuring out all the details that are associated with that.
What do they get in a breakfast like that?
So this morning was a Pillsbury bagel, about yay long, filled with cream cheese. There was a piece of fruit, and then there's a carton of milk.
If you're interested in seeing, there is on the website, there is a menu that's posted for breakfast and for lunch every month. So you
The
can
kids
see-
tell me that the Pillsburys are the best. The chocolate muffins are a close second. The maple flavored Eggo waffles, not so much.
How does that work right now at the breakfast? Is it before school starts or is it during?
So it's before school starts. Any child can come in and go straight and get their breakfast. We keep it open until about 8 o'clock. So that if they don't get there firsthand, but they hit the classroom and they're hungry, they can still go right on in. We have some children that we say, "Did you eat this morning, Emily?" And we send them on in. So our thoughts, we haven't talked to staff and to work through all the details, is that kids could actually be handed a breakfast as they walk in the door.
So what you'd be doing then is just expanding what's there now so that it would basically cover everybody.
Which could also save time and routines at home in the morning.
True.
Even for people that would otherwise eat at home, they can either eat again or they can skip that.
Well, and it also, right now, we have a dorm size refrigerator that we keep snacks in the main hall. All the kids know they can go there. If it's in the fridge or on the fridge, it's free for taking. With the breakfast, we would do a shared basket, like we're doing now in the lunchroom of food the kids don't want, and then it'd be there all day. So our plan is to continue to look at the impacts of hunger. And address that one. All right, then we looked at current transportation, particularly the family bus. Thank you, T, for running all these information for us. 22 students usually currently use the family bus in the morning. 14 are picked up by 7 a.m. 13 are picked up from 7 to 7:15. And the current times, the first pickup is at 6:56 with a Washington drop off of 7:34, which means the average estimated student time is 38 minutes. And MG drop off is at 7:42, which is 45 minutes. And these are all within the limits of time you can be on a bus.
Those are the longest ones. Some of them are shorter if they're getting picked up.
Yes.
And Stephanie, just to clarify, these are for families that have children at Washington and at MG.
So that's a separate route. I
It was
thought we were doing that on all of it. So it's just like it's one route that is this way and then the rest of them are designated Washington or MG.
It's a designated family route.
Didn't realize it.
Thank you, Anna. Then we also looked at reverting back to an 8:15 start time and what impact that would have. First of all, it eliminates the shared routes with Washington and Mundelein High School. It requires the bus company to be able to provide the resources in both drivers and buses for 8 additional routes. Note, they cannot do that at this time. They do not have the capacity to do that. And it is a significant cost increase to both districts to the tune of $220,000 per district. So changing the Washington start time to 8:15 at this time is not feasible. We also looked at the conversation with Reconnect. Currently, Reconnect is housed at Washington in the morning and Washington after school. And the Mechanics Grove students go to Dunbar before school and after school. And Kevin has worked with the Park District Board that Reconnect now will put all families together in one location at Dunbar. And we will transport to and from Washington. So our next steps are to maintain our work with our literacy and our academic progress at Washington, to better support our families with the entire school breakfast idea, and to really work with attendance and tardies to get to the answers. Are there other questions? Go ahead.
Even with, the absences that were recorded, everybody's still being assessed when they eventually get in the building, correct?
Yep,
So the star scores here represent
everybody.
everybody, so. I know on the slide it mentioned the 40 percentile or higher, that's the proficiency, correct?
That's
Not-
the
not
district
student
staff
growth,
proficiency
right?
level, yes.
So I just want to remind the board that 40%, according to the star, is meeting expectations. So that's just a good reminder for us that those results are still meeting expectations, and then, it's in Washington, the student growth percentile, our student growth percentile or
Yep.
progress, right? Is also exceeding. So I do have concerns about the attendance, the absences and the tardies, but looking back at the academics, it's great to see that they're still meeting the expectations.
Yep. And we've targeted about 20 families specifically that we're really working with on them. Some of them are huge hardships. And others, like we sent pictures home this week to a little first grader that your backpack stays here, your shoes stay here. And we're having him own putting things together in the morning so that the whole family can get out the door.
You mentioned the hardships, and part of that, just the fact of getting the kids up and getting them out to the bus.
So, for example, one family, they work on European time. And their first Zoom call starts at 6:45. So they bring them right after that first Zoom call ends. We're working on getting that family on a bus, but even to get that child out to the bus stop when both parents are on a Zoom call is hard. We have another mom that is taking grad school courses and working nights, and she oversleeps. I mean,
It's tough,
So
yeah.
there are some of these hardships that are just gonna have to be worked through. And work through.
And I can relate to the vacations. I had the same thing going on in my classroom. I have more than a handful of students that took spring breaks after their spring break week, so it's happening everywhere. Yeah,
And I understand we didn't take vacations for
right, yeah.
too many years in a row and people are taking them now. Uh-huh.
Come, Barbara.
I wanted to ask you, get some clarification on the topic of fatigue and hunger.
Uh-huh.
So are we currently giving breakfast?
So we are currently doing the breakfast program. Correct.
So I can't find it, but I thought I saw somewhere that in previous years, the PTO funded this.
There's a portion of the snacks.
So in
That's
addition
next.
to our,
So that's not the breakfast.
so in addition to the breakfast program, we are spending a little over $1,200 a year providing snacks for children. Goldfish, Pirates Booty, Slim Jims,
And so it's two separate.
two separate things.
Okay.
Can I get clarification that the breakfast program you're talking about, that's the normal, kind of like the lunch program? where
Yep.
You buy a breakfast if you want to, and if they're on free or reduced lunch, then they get it. It's the same idea
Correct.
where what you're talking about is a change for next year. If you're able to implement breakfast for all. then
Correct.
It would not, it would just be provided for everybody. It would not be a charge for some kids and not for
Correct.
others. And it's not an opt-in. It would be just
Everybody
provided.
would
So
get
that is different from what's going on now.
Correct.
Okay, just making sure. I didn't want to misunderstand.
But the PTO snacks is separate
Got
from the breakfast.
I was gonna ask, how is the staff doing with the school time change?
Nobody has gotten a no left turn ticket. And that we are very thankful for. I think, it's been an adjustment. And I think they're working through it. Their statement to me was, let's not yo-yo this. Let's not go back and forth and back and forth. Let's pick one and stay with it so that we can adjust to it. But I'm very thankful that nobody's gotten in a left turn.
Was that an issue for staff?
Yes, because a bunch of our staff live off of Prairie
I see.
and those times. Like
Are we,
if they
we're
arrive
talking
right
about
there.
leaving in the morning, or are we talking about the people that are cutting into the drop-off line?
Well, we're talking about people that are turning left off of Prairie onto Orchard
For the drop-off.
to
in the
get
morning?
in, but to get into the Washington staff parking.
I see.
But they're
I
adjusting.
didn't realize that. I've heard about this issue, but I thought it was mostly for the parents dropping off that were very upset about it. I didn't realize there was a staff component to it.
There's a staff component to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of comical to read the other stuff.
Well, yes, but I didn't realize there was a whole new nuance. Okay, got it.
Oh, so the dual left turn is off of Orchard into Washington.
It's
No.
off of Prairie
For the drop-off line. People
Into-
can't cut anymore.
So it's off of Prairie turning lot.
and it's off of Orchard into the Washington lot. There's two of them.
Okay, all right.
So people are learning new little,
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
Getting there earlier.
or we don't invite Sarah until after 8. So-
Otherwise, I park 2 blocks away and walk in.
Because now there is Mundelein passed an ordinance, and now that there are signs, it's not just we request that people don't do this.
No.
Now there's an actual,
Yeah.
yeah.
Other questions?
I had
Facebook group.
had a different left turn in my head than what it is. I was thinking no left turn
When you're leaving the lot.
leaving the.
Yes,
lot.
Because that's an
That's-
issue for Reconnect parents, when you're
Yeah,
picking up your children and you're like,
Yes,
"Okay,
that's
but it's
the
after
evening one.
school, there's nobody here. Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
That, I was
Right.
thinking the same thing, that's, it was like, wait, how is staff?
Got it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have to go look at the sign.
I know.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Throw a picture post online if you're interested.
Make sure you're not driving a blue light.
Facebook. That's all I want.
Oh, I don't know my lot. Is that all we have? Don't we have something else for teaching and learning or no?
Oh, that is all we have for teaching and learning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Human resources.
Good evening, everybody. I can tell you as a father of 4 little people under 12, be putting a backpack and shoes out the night before. Something that has worked wonders, except for my spouse. So. We will begin. After a review of the administrative responsibilities and demands that have been placed on the administrative personnel at Washington Mechanics Grove, the district believes that we have detailed and sufficient information that an additional administrative support person is prudent. Specifically, that would be having a full-time assistant principal position at Washington. To provide that detail will be Sarah and Jamie.
Hello again. So just for context, we wrote out what's currently happening in terms of the building administration and the support of the staff and students. And so at Lincoln, we have the principal who's there full-time and oversees all of the programming that's there, not just our D75 programming. And then we also have one of our student service coordinators does part-time at Lincoln and then the other part-time at Washington. At Washington, we have our full-time principal and a part-time assistant principal who is then shared with Washington and Mechanics Grove. And then when you get to Mechanics Grove, we have the full-time principal with the part-time assistant principal who's shared back with Washington and the student services coordinator who's then shared Mechanics Grove and Carl Sandburg. And then at Sandburg, we have the full-time principal and the full-time assistant principal. So there's a lot of overlap in terms of administrative support and covering issues that come up with staff or students and families in the community. And so there's a lot of strong communication skills that are at play here to make sure that everyone knows who's on first and what's on second as you go through a school week. Thank you. given that, we really sat down and thought about the rationale for asking for an additional assistant principal, and which would allow one of the current assistant principal to remain predominantly at one location, Mechanics Grove, and bringing in a new assistant principal to be focused specifically at Washington. We've spent the last 3 years really doing a significant lift in terms of our instructional practices and building up our instructional leadership through a lot of professional development for the administrators as well as for our teachers and our support staff. And so we really want to continue that growth and trajectory that we have maintained. We've pushed this boulder up the hill and we want to keep it there. And that really comes in the form of doing learning walks, visiting the classrooms, providing authentic feedback when they observe a teacher, instructional modeling at times. As we look to tease back our outside consultants more, we need our administrative team to be able to have the time and capacity to fill those roles in our classrooms. We also want to encourage consistent support. So in the case where if there's a student issue that comes up at Washington on a Monday and one administrator is handling it, and then the administrator is then tasked with going to a second building the following day, there's a lot of details that said, this is who I talked to, this is who I did not talk to, this is what you need to do tomorrow, this is what you should not do tomorrow. If you have any questions, call me because I'm going to be over here handling this situation. And so we just thought this would be a really streamlined process to keep someone consistent to handle an issue from beginning to end without having to transfer all that information and having a parent or a student or a teacher have to have multiple points of contact over the course of one situation. We also want to enhance our multi-tiered system of support, and this really speaks to really those behavior and emotional needs and how we're providing those services consistently at all of the buildings and in a timely manner, because we would have someone who is there every day consistently. We would have more opportunities to facilitate those types of conversations. And in addition to all of that, that would take place during the school year. We also know in the summer, our student services coordinators and our current assistant principal are on 200-day contracts, which leaves Jamie responsible for the majority of when we have new students coming in or we're working on transitions. Washington specifically is why we selected the 12-month assistant principal, because it's potentially their introduction to our school system. If they're enrolling a kindergartner and they have extra questions, if they're a family who's transitioning from Lincoln to Washington, it would be a nice opportunity for us to be able to be around and be available all summer to help support them as they come into our programming. Another thing that we really considered is if we bring in this new administrative role, what does that look like in terms of the current responsibilities for our principal and the assistant principal? And how do you distinguish who's going to do what? Because we're adding another person into the mix. And so we were really thoughtful and reflective about that and how the roles could work together in tandem, but then they still would have individual responsibilities. And so while we would have the assistant principal role really increase their availability with students and their ability to support the student needs on a regular basis, this would free up the principal's time to be able to interact more fluidly with the staff and with the parents who may be contacting them or having questions or scheduling meetings. It would give them a little bit more flexibility in order to do some of those instructional practices that we described as well. We know that we want both administrators to be able to give constructive feedback. But when we were thinking about how to distinguish the role, we really thought of the assistant principal as being working with the students or working through the MTSS process or supporting an emotional need or an SEL specific thing that came up, which would allow the principal to engage in those learning walks that we talked about, facilitating our data review meetings, more as opposed to if they're running a meeting and then something comes up and they say, I'm so sorry, I have to excuse myself, you guys keep going, I have to go handle this other topic or issue. And then together they would work in tandem to analyze the school data and really collaborate on next steps in terms of the types of things that they're doing during their faculty meetings and with their collaborative time with their teacher teams, or when they're coming up with ideas or suggestions about how we should use our professional development time on the school improvement days. And this is where I'm going to hand it off to Jamie.
Thanks. All right. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about student services and special education. And so we've been very fortunate in these past years, in my entire tenure with District 75 and even previous to that, to start to bring more of our special education programs in-house. As of next year, as I believe we've shared previously, we'll be having the middle school will then have both of our what we call self-contained programming. That will roll up to Carl Sandburg next year. So that's kind of context for a little bit more about this slide and just the continued expansion of higher programs that require more interaction with leaders in the building. So starting first with the multi-tiered systems of support. So when we think about that, this previously used to be called RTI, response to intervention. And so this is when we're looking at currently the way that we have this set up in our buildings. You may have our student services coordinator, so that would be Cindy or Laura, or the principal or the AP, who's kind of overseeing one level of the MTSS work. So that could be meeting with the grade level teams weekly about data, meeting with digging into the data, having the data review team, which meets with, kind of looks at all the literacy data at the benchmarks, meeting between data digs, and then also individual problem solving. So that's after the students are kind of getting their general curriculum, and then we're looking at, do they need more of an individualized plan? Having an administrative rep at the individual problem solving meeting, again, just depending on the fluidity and availability, you might have a principal, a student services coordinator, or an AP running that. Looking at if we were to able to transition to this model, the primary lead for all multi-tiered systems of support would then be the AP, because there'd be a consistent AP full-time in the building. So they'd be able to address all those levels of support. They'd be able to kind of set up that calendar about when are we going to revisit X students' needs and how they're doing in that intervention on a regular basis, because they would be in the building full-time. As far as the special education component, so whenever there's an IEP meeting, so an IEP meeting is held for a student who receives special education services, and there's at least one annually for every student. Every school has an LEA rep present at that meeting. And so that LEA rep is able to facilitate the IEP meeting and then also just speak on behalf of the district as far as the resources and things. And so up until this time, the primary people who have served as LEA reps would be our two student services coordinators who toggle between multiple buildings. And then sometimes our school psychologists would fill in for some of the IEP meetings. What we would like to do, just in reflecting and looking at, again, the growth and the increased amount of students that we're servicing with more intensive needs in the building, building that capacity in our AP role. So next year, as we've shared, the focus on professional development has been a lot of literacy, and all of our special education staff has been participating in that. Going into next year, we're really excited. We're going to do more intentional training like we did my first year 4 years ago on writing best practice IEPs, having our IEP compliance, like writing goals that are going to meet our students' needs, et cetera. So we're going to re-engage in that training. We've had a lot of new special education staff that have joined the district. So as we are going through that process, what I'm really excited about, along with Cindy Cementa and Laura Ehas, is that we are going to, our goal is to engage the assistant principals in all of that training as well, to build their capacity so that when and if needed, they can serve as LEA reps in IEP meetings. So again, just building that capacity and understanding of the programs that we have, the supports in place, what we can offer within the continuum, and then an understanding of our IEPs and 504s within the building, kind of having that niche and understanding, because at this moment in time, again, a lot of times with Cindy and Laura being in multiple buildings, they are the expert for special education in that building, and we want to just kind of expand that capacity. In addition, we have students who have behavior intervention plans, whether they're formalized in their IEP, or we have some students in more of an MTSS plan who have a behavior plan that they're following, wanting to build capacity also in this AP role where the APs at each of the buildings, so that would include MG and Sandberg, would then participate in this training beginning this summer and be able to have that solid understanding to support special ed programming in each building. Any questions about that so far? I know that was a lot. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this side. So this is what's being proposed by, if we were able to add the additional assistant principal. So when we think about currently, we had talked a lot about how Cindy and Laura, for example, were split between buildings. As we bring the more intensive programming into Carl Sandburg next year, for example, I know that there is going to need to be that student services presence and support more heavily at Carl Sandburg, which has a domino effect to then extract some of that support from Mechanics Grove. And so that's the scenario for next year. In 2 years, there could be something else with special education and whatnot. So if we were able to add this additional assistant principal, that would make, as we spoke to the availability, that would allow for like Stephanie and Tanya as the principals, for example, to have that focus on that instructional leadership primarily, and that the discipline and the behavior would then be addressed by the assistant principals. In this model that we're discussing, as Carl Sandburg gets the new programming, that means that Mark Pilot and Ryan Wood would have the expertise and support of Laura Ehas more consistently. That would be her home-based building for next year, again, based on need. The student services coordinators would be where we need their support as one example. And yeah, and so that's just an example. So we would really have this by adding an additional administrator. We really thought we were very thoughtful in this planning since last year, knowing that the programming was going to roll up, just thinking outside of the box of how we can best support and service our students has been within our dialogue to figure out what's the best fit. And so we think that this gives us the best of all worlds and allows people to concentrate in like a niche and be most accessible and available to staff on a regular basis.
Because really, this one new role is going to impact potentially 7 other people and how they can better focus their attention to their own employment tasks. It'll allow Washington to really be dedicated to their students and their teachers, having that AP there every day consistently with Stephanie to work in tandem. It would allow Tanya to work closely with Louise and work consecutively every day in tandem. It would allow Mark and Ryan to have the support of Laura to help implement the new programming that's rolling up. And really, it's giving consistency for all of the teachers and the students too, who have, they know every day that adult is going to be there and be present and helpful for them, regardless of what comes up.
Can I ask a question? So this proposed building administrative list is a little different than the other one, because the other one you included the special services coordinator, part-time. This one doesn't show that. But I hear you saying that that Laura Ehas would be at SAM. So where do the special services coordinators fit into this?
Sure, that's a great question.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So they would still have their unique 2 buildings. So Cindy Cemento would be with Lincoln and Washington. Laura Ehas would be with Mechanics Grove and Carl Sandburg. But similar to how the teaching and learning coordinators are more of like a district level person who comes and supports where and when needed and can do PD and do all those different pieces. This would allow, like right now at Washington, for example, Cindy Cemento is very regularly involved in all the support calls. So she may not be able to make it to an IEP at Lincoln because she's handling the support calls. So we're trying to extract the reliance on them as that half-time person and make it more where they have more flexibility, if that makes sense. So they will still each have their 2 buildings.
Right, and that was
Yeah.
the part that I was just making
Yeah.
sure. It's not that we're just replacing one
Yeah.
with the other, it's that we're trying to assist.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Really not much is changing in their role.
Right.
What's changing for them is that they will be hopefully removed from some of these more very specific daily tasks at each of the buildings.
Because
To
the
allow-
APs could handle it.
Right,
Mhm.
correct.
Correct.
Because the assistant principal would be there to handle those, and then Cindy and Laura would have the opportunity to really spend more time on special projects or other initiatives, or looking at the data as a whole, planning professional development, some of the other tasks that they also enjoy as part of their job, but generally get sidetracked when something comes up.
Which in turn then helps the staff, because then the staff, hopefully by being able to have an AP who can deal with some of those disciplinary issues, well, right now, you've got one AP floating between two
Right.
buildings, and then that negatively impacts the staff and students when there are incidents and things like that.
Mhm.
And as much as they try to avoid having a delay, there's always a natural delay.
This would also potentially increase our pool of candidates for openings when they do arrive in the next couple of years, I think.
Mhm.
These people would be ready to go if they were interested in that position or available,
Or at least help transition
or at least,
Mhm.
yeah.
the new principal.
Yes,
Yeah, I think in about 2 years, actually.
We've got, yeah, I saw it.
yes.
One next
You
year
read
and
it.
one in 2 years, yeah.
We get the packet up front. Yeah.
Any other questions for us?
No, we never do it.
Well,
Just-
Tanya and Stephanie are here. If you wanted to ask them anything specifically, they are available also. They're ready to respond to anything you have to share.
I just want to clarify, there is a little bit different language on the two slides. The part-time, those are those 200-day employees, and the
Correct.
full-time, the 12 months.
The part-time actually was meant to be that they're split 50% of their time at one building and 50% at the other.
Oh, okay.
The
Okay.
200-day employees are currently, Luis's, so the elementary AP is currently 200 days and the middle school AP is 12 months. So, yeah, we wrote part-time because they were split between
two
buildings, for anyone split between buildings. And then Cindy and Laura are both 200 days as well. So because of the cadence of the work in the summer being very different than the school year, that's why we felt that one of the two positions, being conscientious of fiscal allocations, that one would be sufficient to help cover like when there's vacations and things like that, and help, they could be like the point person to support special education needs with me in the summer.
And I didn't think of this before, and I apologize for not. How does this impact? This doesn't impact when we have a summer school principal, for example, because this AP would not act in that capacity. So we'd still be having a summer school principal that we would be designating, right?
Yes,
just-
that right now is a teacher opportunity for leadership experience. But it does allow for when our 12-month administrators try and hold their vacation days to the summer. But we still want to have building coverage in the summer. So it does add one more person to the mix to make sure that there is an administrator present. Because while our teacher leaders are amazing, it's always nice to have backup support.
Is there a need to staff Lincoln with any of this that we're talking about?
It's a great question. So we're working really, it's actually very exciting, all the things that are happening with Lincoln, because we're working very cohesively and collaboratively, our District 75, Fremont, and Hawthorne on a very regular basis. And so the way that we have it set up now, 2 years ago, we aligned our summer school ESY, extended school year for special education. We aligned ours with Fremont so that the principal would be there for that time and then take their vacation later. And for next year, Hawthorne has joined in with that alignment for the summer. And we as directors, if you will, or our roles in the special education administration have figured out ways to cover in the summer for whatever needs are at Lincoln. We swap actually on an almost every other week basis. If there's going to be an absence of the principal at Lincoln, we have like a whole coverage channel amongst the 3 districts. So we're I feel pretty confident that we're pretty solid with how we've got Lincoln addressed. And they only run a very short ESY of like 3 weeks, and then it's pretty much shut down for the rest of the summer. A great question.
Would this have a different job description than our current assistant principals, or do we use the same one?
Similar.
It's very similar. We did look at the 12-month assistant principal job description that was established for Carl Sandberg, but that one is more middle school driven, and this new one would have more language specific to an elementary position. But it does look very similar.
And tonight, are we voting on just adding the position, or are we also voting on the job description?
Adding the position.
Just adding the.
Just adding the position.
You know, you get the current point of order.
Yeah, yeah.
so we're working through that, like in draft form, and then also just has some significant student services overlay within it as well, which will be different.
In this position, it's posted internally and externally.
Yes. And we have language in our CBA that talks about interviewing internal candidates. That was updated with the last contract.
So is what I'm getting out of this is if we were talking about span of control and chain of command and organizational reporting, we eliminate now this back and forth going from school to school and losing context from day to day on what potentially is going on. We're going to be able to get more ownership by having persons assigned to those buildings, which we don't really have now because they're going back and forth. We're gonna be able to have somebody that's gonna be available when the principal's gone, that everybody's gonna know this is the next person in the chain of command that's gonna be responsible and everybody's gonna be reporting to.
Yeah, that'll be very helpful.
And they're also gonna know, because right now, who do these people report to?
So the assistant
Two
principal,
different
yeah.
principals that
Would
they're
report to the
reporting to.
principal.
Correct.
And as the old saying is, no dog can serve two masters. So
I hadn't heard that one before. Got a new one for the.
Glad Louise is not here tonight.
Hold on, let me text her. She might be on the Zoom call.
and we'll also be able to get more specific monitoring. Evaluations are gonna be going from principal to assistant principal in each one of those buildings.
Yeah, they'll each be able to pick up a load of the.
Right.
Exactly.
So overall, this is gonna be a great enhancement to the administrative function and administrative abilities of each one of the facilities.
What a great summary. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just want to clarify to make sure, so in the process, I know Jamie and Sarah presented tonight. Stephanie and Tanya were instrumental in being able to talk through what this would mean. They actually brought it up to us saying, can we consider this? We've been going over it for probably the last 3 months, and determining whether or not it was something to bring forward. They've been great through the process and working with everybody, so it was a collaborative process as we went through it to try to make sure we did what we felt would be most efficient for our school district.
Any other?
All right, thank you so much.
I have 3 items in my agenda area. I'm gonna go out of order a little bit because one of them I would like some additional support with Shane. That'd be in regards to our press policy 111. So I'll do that one last. First item in my section is regards to the final schedule for the 22-23 school year. This is an annual. At this point, we did not use any emergency weather days or emergency days, period. So what we've done is remove those from our calendar, which were at the last week or first week in June. Those are all removed. And if approved, then we would submit this to the regional office starting anytime as of May 1st. And that's the document that we have to submit with their ROE because they confirmed our students were in attendance the number of minimum days as required by the state. It's something all public schools are required to do. So
You realize we've had snow this week, and so by doing this, now you're going to cause us to.
Crossing my fingers, not enough that we have to close anything. If we did, we'd always be able to come back at some point. We got the whole month of May before it has to be turned in.
One more morning.
Yes, we'll be okay.
2, actually.
If it does start snowing, we think we're closing, I'm calling you at 5 o'clock. That is up for action tonight. We'd ask that you support approving the calendar as is. Another annual report that we need to submit, public schools need to do this, is our safety drills. So these are our in shelter drills, our bus drills, and our fire drills that we need to do at our school facilities. And any of our doing of our lockdown drills. So there are minimum requirements that all public schools need to do. We have to document that. We do work with the director of security, Fred Cleora, heads this up and works with the building principals, tries to make sure we're all organized and get it submitted. These are the documentations that support that we've done the required drills. And if approved by the board, this would be also forwarded on to the Regional Office of Education. Okay. Last one, and this is a first reading for us, is Press Plus 111. In going through that, there's not a lot of changes in this one. A lot of it is more legislative driven. And the reason I asked to go last was because I wanted Shane to be able to talk through what I think is the biggest part from your perspective as a board to at least learn, know, and understand and kind of see some of the implications it could have for our school district. And it's in regards to the employment history review process. That's the one common thread you're going to see through those press policies that's getting implemented. And there is a significant impact, not just to our school district, but to all public schools in the area. And Shane here will take you through what this could and will look like, and hopefully will improve over time. So, okay.
So the Illinois legislature passed and the governor signed a new bill called Faith's Law that places compliance obligations on public employers. The best way to articulate how this would work would be take a traditional applicant through a process. So when after July 1, when an applicant applies for a job, we are able to interview them and select them if they are qualified. However, when that applicant applies, they will now need to list every employment position that they have held if it had direct contact with children. That could be a lifeguard at the YMCA over the summer when they were in high school, working at Six Flags when they were in college. The expectation is that they provide a very detailed accounting of everywhere that they have worked before they start, but after we extend the position to hire them. The 75 will need to complete a form that has been created by ISB and send that, mail that. There's no electronic way of doing this. Mail that to all of those employers. So we will be increasing our postage budget rather substantially. We can continue to have that employee remain employed. The only way that their employment would be disqualified is if one of those past employers shared that they had been employed with that employer, but resigned during an investigation of sexual assault or sexual misconduct or sexual harassment, had been terminated for that, and the employee was not forthcoming on that application as to why they were terminated, or if they resigned in lieu of a termination proceeding. The reality is private employers are not going to have the capacity to respond to all of these. So we may get some timely, we may get some 8 months later, we may get some not at all. The burden that it is for the district is if we have a teacher who works here or has worked here and goes and works someplace else, we will be receiving all of those forms. And the expectation is that we complete them and send them back promptly. So we will be doing daily reviews, possibly. It's gonna vary depending. Hiring season is going to be a little busier than some of the times where it's a little bit more quiet. But anybody that we bring to the board for hire, prior to them starting, we will be getting these forms out and exchanging paperwork. There's no centralized process or electronic process for this. When the language of the bill was originally created, the hope was that ISB would serve as a clearinghouse, and for legal reasons, ISB wanted absolutely nothing to do with it because they were afraid that someone's going to slip by and liability would fall back onto them. So now the liability falls onto the districts. We saw this coming. And so my professional organization in the state, and specifically my professional organization in Lake County, have been working closely with outside vendors to share with them what this obligation would be And we've identified an entity called Verifint. This group would traditionally do employment verifications if someone was taking out a bank loan. But they do have software capacity for that. We've signed nothing. We've done nothing. On Friday, we are getting together as a group to see what this vendor's proposal might look like, what cost that would be to the district. We don't know right now. But I can tell you that from an HR standpoint, we have the capacity to manage this first wave this year. And we're dedicating resources and time to trying to make that as efficiently as we can in-house. But there may be the benefit of exploring the use of an outside vendor depending upon cost and their capacity as other district or peers evaluate that as well.
Would an applicant have to send information to a family they babysat for years ago?
So yes,
Or
technically
like-
under the law, if you drew an income, now did you report that income to the
Yeah, that's
IRS?
right.
I don't know. But
That list can
There-
be huge.
yes, it is incredibly vague. If you nanny.
Yeah.
And you got, then yes.
Mm.
If you work dealing ice cream,
Yeah.
you know, yes,
And what happens if those former employers can't be contacted?
right. Then we are not under the obligation to try to Google them or find them or track them down. It is at the burden on the employee to try to identify where that is. And so, for example, as we would move candidates through a search and selection process, we would be looking at those applicants to see, okay, is there any gray areas? Is there any tidying up that applicant would need to do? So this isn't coming after we offer the role.
Because it's conceivable that somebody they work for that no longer exists.
Correct. Businesses may have folded, somebody may have died, and yeah, there's going to be some dead ends.
I mean, it seems like, I mean, there's lots of other employment industries that do similar things like this. It's just, it hasn't yet extended to the educational realm, and for reasons I can understand, it's probably needs to. Now, I would hope that at some point it becomes more than just a mailing process, and definitely that's not on us, obviously. But, you know, I guess some inquiries in this is at least better than nothing, and the fact that I imagine it'll be like a form that gets sent out, and it's probably, I'm sure it's very similar to when you apply for certain federal positions or your whole character fitness application when you go to law school, things like that, where they literally just send it and it's like checkbox. If you have any concerns, you know, yes, no, or they just don't send it back. I mean, it gives at least an opportunity where normally people would have been so liability minded not to want to say anything for fear of violating, you know, possibly violating the person's rights without thinking that, yes, but I mean, if somebody has gone to 5 different districts and resigned from each position before anything was there, that you don't want them to go to a 6th and have some new issue come up. So this makes sense. And obviously I like to hear that there is at least entities out there that can help facilitate in this, because we don't want, you know, your poor staff having to dig through all the boxes to figure that kind of stuff out, especially when they may not have known the people that worked here 20 years ago or whatever.
Right.
But it obviously has to be done. It seems prudent as to why it would be. And there's going to be kinks that'll need to be worked out the way, like with everything new, right?
And this is separate and apart from the current background check and the sex offender registry check.
It sounds like this is an attempt to try to catch it before somebody may have had a conviction.
Yeah.
To be on those things, because if you don't ever have those, doesn't mean nothing happened, or was it, so it's at least, it's trying to get more information.
Is there any kind of requirement for current employees?
No, we don't have to do current employees. Volunteers is a gray area. In talking with Kevin, it makes no sense for us to provide this for new incoming employees. Then 10 feet away at a basketball game, a volunteer hasn't had that same responsibility or burden. So anybody, and like we do this already with the background checks or with Raptor, we are going to be extending this to any parties that we are going to be having on campus to ensure that anybody that meets that definition doesn't sneak through just because of they're not getting paid.
That would apply to subs as well, right?
And that's where I think probably the substantial burden is going to fall, is because you could have one sub that is sub at multiple districts, and we're all going to be firing letters back and forth. So any way that we can make a more efficient process just for that group will be helpful. And it does extend to out-of-state employment as well, so if they worked at the Milwaukee Zoo, we would be obligated to mail that there.
I imagine the general expense line for postage in the last 10 years has gone down. So the fact that it may uptick just a little bit sounds like it would be for a good reason, but more concerned about the staff being able to handle it than the postage. But yeah,
And I do keep a master list of our bad actors, so one of them crosses my desk, it's not long. So, but I would be the one checking the box if that was if one of those came our way.
Thank you, Shane.
My son.
All right, next up is committee updates. First one is board policies.
so like we talked about last month, I thought we'd wait and prepare kind of a master plan over the next 2 years, like we talked about, and start kind of where we have left off with our new board member the next time, so that we kind of all start from there and move through our new plan. One thing that I wanted to ask, which is kind of along the lines, but it's related to policy. Do we want to, since we are going to have a new board member next month, do we want to, and I know all of the policies are available online, but this is obviously a lot of information for a new board member. Do we want to go ahead and put together a binder for new, like as part of the onboarding process of the new board member, with the idea of policies, knowing that we will be going through them over the next, but that way sometimes it's easier to flip through. I just didn't know if that was something, I know we talked about doing, as part of the code of conduct and the mentoring, and the part of our policies already say we will have a mentoring program for a little bit more of a process for new board members. I thought that was something at least to be discussed, whether or not we thought that was prudent. I don't know that everybody on the board needs one, because we all know where to find it if we want to, but there's a lot of new information as a new board member. And I know that it's time consuming for Anna, and I don't need to put her through extra things if we don't need to, but with only one board member, not 3, I thought maybe that might be prudent, so that at least she's able to hit the ground running.
You're just talking about adding the printed out policy to the binder that they already gave us when we.
Yeah, but it basically would be a binder of its own, because
Yeah.
it's about the, when they print it all out, but
I think it's a good idea, and then when they're done with it, we can just leave it in the district office for.
except that it will change. So I mean,
Yeah.
because we modify it a couple times a year when we do it. So it's kind of
Yeah, it'd be
outdated
a
as soon
matter
as you
of
print
making
it, and I
changes.
realize that. And so it's,
Yeah, but even at that, it's taking pages out and inserting.
yeah, but honestly, that's almost more time consuming.
Yeah.
I think after the initial part of it, I think it's a matter of, then you can show where to go. But and maybe we just should show her the link and not worry about it, but I just didn't know if what everybody thought about that. I'm not looking to dictate that. I just thought that was an idea that I had, but we've been.
My
No,
personal
that's a
preference
lot
is always paper, but
to put together. And it's gonna change. And as you said, everyone knows where to go to get it,
Okay,
and that could be part of the mentoring thing.
Sure.
Here's the policy,
Show
show
them
what
where.
they mean,
Yeah.
and here's where you can go to get them.
and I understand that. I was just, like I said, just putting it out there, but totally, I can see both sides of it, so I didn't have strong feelings either way. And again, I don't want to waste honest time,
Yeah.
so that was certainly an important piece of it too.
I could see that as someone's preference though, and if, in mentoring process, they request that because it's easier
Yeah.
to look through, then,
yeah, I guess that's just a question maybe could be asked.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking when you're talking about, we're gonna meet with Georgie. Hopefully for the next meeting, that's a question we could certainly ask, what would be your preference for starting?
Just because I know when I start, I wasn't even aware that we had policies, let alone where to find them. That just wasn't in my purview at that point, and, knowing that we are making it a point to try to review them together and we're trying to make that a part of. Sometimes it might be helpful to kind of flip through them ahead of time, but obviously she can easily go to the link as long as she knows where to find it, and that's okay too. And I don't know her skill set and preference, so maybe that's just a question to ask. You know, like I said, don't have strong feelings either way, but that was a thought that came to mind that I wanted to at least bring up, but other than that, then we can kind of start at our review and move towards that.
Next up is finance advisory.
It's me.
Yep.
So we met on 10th, 11th, 12th. And we went through the budget again. Because from the last board meeting to this board meeting, there's things that changed, and again, T went through. And we had a very in-depth discussion because revenues and expenditures both have changed, and that's what you're seeing tonight, is what the end product is. And again, there's a narrative section that's attached to this, that's in the packet. If you have an opportunity, again, it's really, I think, important that you go through and at least get the highlights of it and be aware of where the dollars are coming from and where they're going. And especially now, because we had to end up changing it, but we ended up changing it and we're still balanced. So that's good news. Our next meeting will be on October 2nd, and we're going to be talking about some goal setting things that the committee is going to be looking at to include, you know, a look at operational aspects of the committee. And what is the committee going to be looking at? What are we going to be doing? What are the expectations of the committee, and what are the outcomes that we will be looking for that are going to be a benefit to the board? And other topics were registration and transportation issues. So it's about it.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Next up is shared services. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, so.
Sure, I can give an update. We met just last week with our two counterparts over in D120 to go over the, I'll pack it up, the super eval online program for evaluating the superintendent. What Emily and I worked on was inputting our strategic plan goals into the evaluation. So now the evaluation reflects the strategic plan goals that were just developed. That's really it for now. Once that's all set up, my understanding is that Dr. Myers can add artifacts to each of the goals to demonstrate evidence, and then we will use that to evaluate. We did choose a rubric that we had some different, I don't know, what do you call them, the domain areas that we connected goals to. And so we will see that rubric when we evaluate, is my understanding, and tied in with the goals.
And those are the same for both districts, is that what you're saying, or similar? Or is it just limited to us?
We ended up doing it differently because we used our strategic plan for our goals, and they had some goal sets of their own. However, the rubric and the domains that they're tied to are the same. I don't know if I'm listening.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you, Rick. And last is strategic planning.
So we kind of put things off. If you recall, we're at a point where the next phase of this is the action plan by the staff on what and how they see the goals that we established. And that is taking time for them to meet with the staff, but as you heard tonight, with everything that Jamie and Sarah are involved in and where they're going. And then you put on top of that, you know, what we've been doing with budget, and you put on top of that, the spring break where we lost a week, so. The committee wants to meet with Jamie and Sarah and go over one more time with them what the action plan is, what it looks like, so that we're all on the same page. And bring that product then to the May board meeting. So we will have that by then. So we're gonna meet, the committee's gonna meet again with Jamie and Sarah over the next 2 weeks sometime. We're gonna set up a date and meet and then have that completed. Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. Representative updates. First one is the STEAM Foundation. Anything happening this week, Chrissy? Maybe on
We have a
Thursday
lot
night?
of things going on, in the next month, but yes, we have the pizza throwdown on Thursday. There are now 10 pizza vendors that are, participating. We have a last minute ad. Which
I wish they would
lots of
put
changes.
who they are on all their public.
Well, because it changed in the last week, that would have been extra hard because a lot of them were late comers. But
Okay.
after we had finalized everything and had our final meeting last week, somebody who's never done it before is now doing it. So, I can give you a list if you really want to know, but there is, because like with all industries, they're having, usually we ask each of the vendors to give a staff member or two to help either bring their pizzas there and then serve them up. But most of them cannot afford to let go of any staff because they're having trouble getting staff to run their facilities. So we are in need of a lot of volunteers. So if any, there's going to be room for help everywhere. And because a lot of people seem to be, especially with some schedule changes recently and everything, there's a lot of late additions. So we're anticipating a lot more walk-ins than usually pre-sales that we usually have. So they are organizing for the pre-sales. They're going to have their wristband and their ballot already pre-set up. But if they didn't register, people are gonna, so there's gonna be extra people checking in, plus then people, we don't usually have to staff the pizza stations, but now there's gonna be more of that. So anybody that is around and available, we could use your help, even if that means you bring your kids. I know that's an issue for everyone.
5 to maybe 6:30.
Okay, that's fine. 5 to 7 was ideal, but they'll take anything, because obviously by that time people start, being done anyway. So
Can you remind me the time? Is it 5 to 7?
5 to 7 is the event time. So we're gonna show up a little early to start setting up, but so they said ideally 5 to 7, because that's when at pizza time, we'll be doing that. And they will be selling, sodas and water and things like that. So that will be available and should be a fun time since we haven't done it in a few years. I gave Nikki some teasing about it because she kept posting everywhere that, it's had a 2-year hiatus. And I was like, am I missing something? Hasn't it been longer? She goes, oh, you're right. I guess it's been almost 4 years. Yeah. So we're excited to be able to get to do it again, and hopefully it all works out because, we have 2 big fundraisers and this is what funds basically all the things that we're able to donate. And we like to keep doing the granting teacher grants and things like that come up, and being able to, put on a lot of the events that they do and they're able to do. So we're excited about that. But also, we are also simultaneously planning for, they are doing the Mundance Film Festival, which is also something they haven't gotten to do in the last couple of years, which for those not familiar is they ask students to, it's volunteer who want to do it, to create videos or films, short videos that then get critiqued by a judge and put up, and it's kind of like the Sundance Film Festival. They do it at the high school. So the only day that was available that they've got reserved, it's going to be the same night as the 8th grade event at Sandburg, which is May 12th, Friday, May 12th. But it's when they're doing it. And but it also happens to be prom for the high school. So provide, finding the limo, because that's a big deal. The kids usually get to go from MG or and over to the high school, and we have paparazzi. I think we're still looking for some paparazzi who want to play paparazzi and take pictures of as they're getting out of the limo. But and I know Mr. Pilot, I believe, is going to be the administrator there this year, helping get the kids out, and they get to walk a red carpet to go in. It's fun. My oldest got to do it with the Girl Scout troop a few years ago. The troop did a submission, and that was a lot of fun. So I think we do have a party bus instead of a limo, but that's the closest thing, because apparently a lot of limo companies aren't really doing limos anymore, because they're getting away from that, because people just aren't renting them anymore for all kinds of reasons. So party bus is what it's like. So thanks. I think that still should be fun. So that's gonna be Friday, May 12th. And then the Science Explorers is going to be at our next full board meeting, May 23rd. So that did get pushed back just because of timing with all the other things going on. They wanted to give the kids a little extra time, so we should be able to see that. If everybody comes a little bit early, we'll be able to see it out, I'll be the next time. Other things going on in the next month. And then STEAM camps are already in registration for the summer as well.
Okay, thank you. Eric Seadoff?
At our last governing board meeting, they presented the budget. I think I actually spoke about that at our last board meeting. That'll be presented again in June at the next governing board meeting where we will approve that. Just some highlights from that budget report so far. They're anticipating decreased enrollment with decreased staffing, tuition up 5%, and also O&M expenses up 5%. Quick enrollment update. There are currently 24 non-certified vacancies. And there are now caps in 6 of their programs due to low staffing.
Okay, thank you. And Ray, community outreach.
No report.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there any items on the consent agenda any board member would like to remove from the agenda before we vote? Okay, if not, I move that we approve the consent agenda for tonight. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly?
Aye.
Please forget, okay, it's the Y. No, I know, I was trying to look at what the designation that I'm supposed to be, that's what I was asking. Pittsky.
Aye.
Okay, Carl,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Deletier.
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
and Kayakis is absent.
Okay, next is the board action items. First one is the tentative budget draft. I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the fiscal year 23-24 draft tentative budget as presented.
Second.
Mr. Rose. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Pittsky.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Deletier.
Aye.
And Carl.
Aye.
Next is the assistant principal. I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the assistant principal proposal as presented.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Deletier.
Aye.
Pittsky.
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
and Fingerhut, aye. Kayakis is absent.
And the last one is the annual review of safety drills. I move that the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve Carl Sandburg, Mechanics Grove, Washington, and Lincoln School required safety and drill plans as presented.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Pittsky.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Carl,
Aye.
Deletier.
Aye.
And Rose.
Aye.
Go calendar.
Useful.
Sorry, I did miss one. Sorry. School calendar. I move the Board of Education accept the recommendation to approve the final 22-23 school calendar as presented.
Second,
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Rose,
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
and Deletier.
Aye.
And Hiskey.
Aye.
Okay, this stuff.
Okay, next is executive session. I move that the Board of Education will enter into executive session at 8:23 PM for appointment, employment compensation, discipline, performance of specific employees, the sale or purchase of securities, investments, or investment contracts, and discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act.
Second,
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Hiskey.
Aye.
Deletier.
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
and Rose.
Aye.
For the meeting, will the secretary please call the roll?
8:54, Holly,
Here.
Rose,
Here.
Carl,
Here.
Hiskey.
Here.
Kayakis is absent, Fingerhut here, Deletier.
Here.
Okay, I move that we approve the executive session minutes from March 14, 2023.
Second,
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Deletier.
Aye.
Hiskey.
Aye.
Carl. Aye. And Rose.
Aye.
Kayakis is absent.
Okay, President's prerogative. Well, this is the last one. Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful long 14 years.
Now it's 14 years.
It's a sort of a little incredible to me, like how much board meetings have changed over that time. Now we have our one monthly meeting and we have all these committee meetings. Where in the past we would do committee of the whole, so everyone would get together to hear everything. Which I thought was good, but in the current situation we're in, that's the way it works now with one meeting a month, so. It is what it is. So, but it's been fun. I have two kids in college now. When I first started, they were both in elementary school. So, yeah. That's about all I have. Anything anyone
Enjoy your
would like,
retirement.
sorry,
Enjoy your
thank
retirement.
you. Anything anyone would like to see in a future agenda? No, okay. Yeah, Eric.
Were we gonna talk about broadcasting? We're gonna talk about that again,
We keep, we
Yeah.
usually bring it up in the May or June meeting, we'll get the data points again, bring it back to the group.
And then I would encourage you to try to somehow, have more interaction with students, because we haven't really done that in the last couple of years, and that's been, those are the people that we serve, really. And so it'd be nice to get back to doing that. We've had talked about it a little bit, have a couple ideas, but I'd really like to see some of that.
And I shared a Facebook, the screenshot of a Facebook post of what Fremont does, which I thought was neat, where it looks like they bring somebody to each meeting and it's an opportunity for
Yep.
Peter to do PR and for us, and, there's different ideas, but yeah,
Right.
I like that idea.
Okay, anything else for the good of the group? All right,
thank you for your time.
thank you. You're welcome.
I'll be here on May 11th, right?
Mail them,
Yep.
yep. 5 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Celebrate.
Okay,
Kevin, I'll just question.
Yeah.
You see a phone call coming from that guy back there? Don't answer.
okay. You're speaking of recent experience, Al?
I am.
Okay, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.